Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced a 3-day ceasefire in the war with Ukraine taking place between the 8th and 10th of May, marking the end of World War II. Meanwhile, Ukraine says Russia has targeted it with 166 drones overnight and during today. Polls have opened across the whole of Canada as the country votes in a snap federal election. Mark Carney's Liberal Party have a slight lead in some polls. The Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, had been strong favourites, though the race is expected to be close. The US State Department says it is in touch with both India and Pakistan, urging them to work towards what it has called a responsible solution. It comes as both nations reportedly exchanged small arms fire across the line of control for a fourth night. Chaos has erupted in large areas of Spain and Portugal following mass blackouts in both nations. Travel has been disrupted with road signals and underground train services grinding to a halt, along with flight and utility disruption. A Palestinian envoy has accused Israel of using aid as a weapon of war during an International Court of Justice hearing. Aid blockages have been in place since the start of March, while further deadly strikes have been reported by local media. Yemen's Houthi rebels say a US airstrike has killed 68 African detainees at a prison in Yemen's Sada province. The reported strike from the US comes amid continued military action over Houthi strikes on Red Sea shipping and Israel. The Vatican says that a conclave to elect a new pope will start on May the 7th with 135 Roman Catholic cardinals eligible to vote. A current 9-day period of mourning is in place following the burial of Pope Francis. Denmark's King Friedrich is to visit Greenland in a show of unity amid interest from US President Donald Trump in taking over the Arctic island. Greenland is a self-governing territory of Denmark, with relations suffering in recent years. We start off in North America today, and polling stations are now open across the whole of Canada for a snap election that will decide the next Prime Minister of the country. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet, who leads the Quebec Souverainiste Party, focused on the French-speaking province, voted in Chambly, Quebec. Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre voted in Ottawa, where he has represented the riding of Carleton since 2004. He was joined by his wife Aneda at the polling station, where 91 candidates are on the ballot. Earlier, US President Donald Trump urged Canadians to vote with the goal of making Canada the cherished 51st state of the United States of America, in a post on his Truth Social account. In response, Poilievre told Trump to stay out of our election, emphasising that Canada will never be the 51st state. Liberal leader Mark Carney also weighed in, asserting that Canada does not outsiders decide what happens here. Let's listen in to Trump's latest comment.
What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. We give them protection, military protection. We don't need them to build our cars. I'd rather see Detroit or South Carolina or any one of our Tennessee, any one of our states build the cars. They could do it very easily. We don't need them for the cars. We don't need them for lumber. We don't need them for anything. We don't need them for energy. We have more energy than they do. We don't need them for energy. So I say, why are we doing this? Why are we willing to lose between $100 billion and $200 billion a year? We don't need them. As a state, it's different. As a state, it's much different. And there are no tariffs. So
Well, away from Trump's comments, Canadians are heading to the polls. Let's listen in to what some Canadian voters in Ottawa have said.
Just following COVID, there's a lot going on in life, and one of the issues that are important to me. And I follow the news more closely than I've ever done before, so just would feel like I had more of a choice this time.
I mean, I always vote, but this one feels particularly important because of what's happening with the United States. I feel like it's a scary time, and I just want to make sure that I'm voting for leadership that's going to help to take us through that time. Actually, I don't typically vote for the Liberals, but it felt like it made sense in the current environment.
Well, Donald Trump's comments leading up to this election have clearly weighed heavy in the minds of some voters. Joining us to discuss his comments and the election itself is Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solution, joining us from Colorado. Daniel, thank you very much for being here with us. Looking at Trump's statement that he's made again on Truth Social, reaffirming his comments around the 51st state of the United States relating to Canada, why do you think he's chosen to do this on Election Day?
Well, there would be little reason for him to change his tune. That's not like him, and I think that would be unrealistic. You know, it's hard to imagine that in Mexico, whoever is running would be the subject of discussion in America, and the reverse is true with Canada and America. Americans would never really focus on who's running there and the impact it might have on them. But the reverse is certainly true in Canada today. Very many people in Canada are very preoccupied with Mr. Trump and his policies and what that implies for them. And that's why I think that it's highly likely that Mr. Carney is ultimately going to prevail. So the Conservatives blew a 25-point lead before all of this discussion of the 51st state started appearing weeks ago. And now, you know, Mr. Carney is poised to lead and win. And the polls, as you suggest, have him perhaps leading by 2 or 3 points. I would suggest it wouldn't surprise me if the polls turn out to be wrong, in the sense that he probably will win by a larger margin than they're suggesting. That at least would be my expectation.
Yes, Daniel, absolutely. Of course, we've seen some of the Canadian leaders voting, and you talk about that race. It seems like it is a two-horse race, but the NDP could play a role. Also, voters in Quebec could be pivotal if they decide to vote for a party that isn't Bloc Québécois. How do you see those smaller parties having an influence, if any, on this Canadian election?
Well, you're right to point out that typically the smaller parties have an impact on the election, and that's usually to the benefit of the Conservatives. But in this case, I don't see that happening. I think that the smaller parties are likely to have less of an impact on the election this time around. And if that is the case, then what's likely to happen is ultimately that, the Liberals are going to win by the larger margin, because they're not going to be giving some of their vote away as a result of what's happening in this election.
Absolutely. Daniel, from your position in the States, how important do you think this election is for those relations? We know, of course, ongoing tariff disputes, but also looking at wider geopolitical conflicts, especially the Russia-Ukraine war, in which Canada has been clearly aligned with European allies, in contrast to some of Donald Trump's moves.
I think Trump is likely to see this more of a distraction than anything else. I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on U.S.-Canada relations at the end of the day, because he's got other things that he's focusing on. I think both Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney have made it clear that they don't want to be the 51st state. Canadians don't want to be the 51st state. And so I think at the end of the day, we're just going to sort of be in a permanent tug of war with no winner and no loser, because at the end of the day, the Canadian-U.S. relationship is extremely important. Everybody understands that. And if you take away the political bluster, what you've got is a relationship that matters to both countries. So my guess is that there will be a climb down after this election, and that cooler heads will prevail.
Daniel, thank you ever so much for joining us. Of course, this election and voting is still underway. Stay with us here on NewsX World for all of the updates and a final resolution as to who the next Prime Minister of Canada will be. But we move away from North America to bring you some breaking news from Europe. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has addressed the public after a national power outage. He said that there is no conclusive information on the causes of these blackouts, which are also impacting people living in Portugal. He later added, for the time being, there are no public security problems and that payment systems are working normally, as well as digital banking. Some areas that have been interrupted include travel, traffic signals aren't working, it's ground a halt to some air travel and also train networks. This, of course, is a developing story and we will bring you all of those updates as we get them. But we move now to the Middle East, and according to Houthi-run state media, at least 68 African migrants have been killed in a US airstrike. The strikes took place at a detention centre in Sada, Yemen. The attack, which also left 47 others critically injured, according to local media, targeted a facility holding over 100 migrants. Many of the affected are from Ethiopia and Somalia. The Houthis have condemned the strike as a war crime. The US military has not yet commented, but this incident comes amid ongoing US operations against Houthi forces. These attacks have been intensifying since March. Humanitarian groups, including the International Organization for Migration, have expressed deep concern over the devastating impact on vulnerable migrants. Thousands of people from the Horn of Africa continue to risk dangerous journeys through Yemen, often ending up in overcrowded detention centres under harsh conditions. Well, joining us to discuss these reported strikes is Adrian Calamel, a terrorism scholar and fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute, who's joining us from New York. Adrian, thank you as always for being here with us. We've heard reports of this deadly strike on a detention centre. Is this just a big US mistake?
Thank you for having me. Good to see you again, Joshua. Good evening to all your viewers. I think we really need to wait for the reports to come out. We have to look where the strike was. That was up in Sada. That's where the Houthis are from. That's Houthi-controlled area. If you look back on Monday, there was a strike at the Farwa market in Sana'a that killed 40, and the Houthis were blaming it on the United States. That turned out to be an errant Houthi missile that hit that market. And then the Houthis were arresting any locals who were filming the damage to show. So I think we really need to wait for the intelligence to come out on this. The United States, if they made a mistake on this, they will come forward and say, yeah, we made a mistake. But I think we need to exercise some restraint in blaming the United States for this right away, because it very well could be a Houthi misfire. And this has happened before. They fire their missiles from heavily populated areas. They also control missile factories and whatnot inside heavily controlled areas. And I also want to mention that one of the top Houthi officials in this strike, I don't know if this is to cover up for this, the announcement of hitting this migrant camp, but one of the top Houthi officials in that area in Sada, I believe the governor, and if you want to say governor, he's a military leader who controls the area. He was eliminated. So there's mixed reporting on a lot of things, but the Houthis, they had to know that they got away with this for a year of firing missiles with impunity, and now war has come back to them. They started this war, and now they're facing the reprisals. Not the reprisals, but it's really freedom of navigation, and the Houthis have really put the Yemeni people into basically bondage and hostage the way they have kept them.
Yes, Adrian, I do want to touch a little bit more on that, because some of our audience may not be aware of the current situation. surrounding the Yemen Houthi rebels. Can you provide us a bit of context on why these US strikes are happening and the wider geopolitical tensions in which the Houthi rebels are involved in?
Yeah, well, this is all Great question, Joshua. This is all connected back to Tehran and the Islamic Republic of Iran. We see a two-track here with the Trump administration negotiations around their nuclear program, but you also have a maximum pressure campaign, which is an economic pressure, and then as well as kinetic action around the margins, which is what we saw during the first Trump administration with airstrikes, whether they be in Yemen, whether they be taking out Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad. So we're seeing a continuation of Trump's policy towards the Islamic Republic. Now, the Houthis, prior to October 7th, 2023, not too many people knew who they were, but they are probably one of the greatest successes if you look at proxies for the Islamic Republic. It was a relatively low finance operation that is giving them great results if you want to talk about destabilization, threatening international shipping, etc.
Yes, Adrian, thank you very much for providing that context. As we bring an end to this discussion, how do you see the future of this US military action in Yemen taking shape? And is this something that we will see continuing in the coming weeks and months, potentially years?
That is another great question, Joshua. It's hard to predict. There's multiple ways that this can go. We have to remember that the Houthis they're stretched right now. They really have a manpower problem. And one of the biggest crimes that they've committed is recruitment of child soldiers. So there's the option of working with the Southern Transitional Council and sweeping back and pushing the Houthis back up to Sada. But Yemen's been going through decades long of civil war, and the country is really in a difficult state. So you hate to see more bloodshed and more things that can lead to famine and those type of things. But at the same point, we have to understand that the Houthis have put a blanket over the country, over the most important ports of the country, except with the exclusion of Aden. So it's really difficult to say where it's going to go from here. I think, it's going to be from a decade from now, I don't even know what it's going to look like.
Absolutely, Adrian. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us to discuss the ongoing situation in Yemen. We are moving on now, but we're staying in the region. And as hearings have opened at the World Court, the UN and Palestinian representatives have accused Israel of breaking international law by blocking humanitarian aid into Gaza. UN legal counsellor Eleanor Hamaskal told judges that Israel must allow aid into occupied territories. Palestinian envoy Ammar Hijazi called Israel's blockade a weapon of war against Gaza's 2.3 million people. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar dismissed the hearing as a circus, accusing the UN of covering for Hamas. Israel maintains it stands that it won't allow full aid access until Hamas releases the hostages it holds. The International Court of Justice was asked in December to issue an advisory opinion on Israel's obligations. Its rulings carry political weight but are not legally binding. Let's listen in to what Dr. Riyad Mansour, the permanent observer of Palestine to the UN, said during today's hearing.
We came here carrying the load of tremendous amount of pain of our people. And we are trying our best to convey it in the best possible way and in a deserving way for those who are suffering immensely. It cuts our heart apart when we see this massive number of our children and women being slaughtered in this genocidal war. Stop starving the Palestinian people. Allow them to continue to live. Allow them to clean the rubbles and to have temporary housing so that we can rebuild our country, our Gaza.
Meanwhile, Gaza's Civil Defense Agency says that at least 40 Palestinians have been killed today in Israeli airstrikes, including 8 members of the Abu Mahdi family. The Gaza Health Ministry has reported that more than 52,300 people have died since the war began in October 2023, triggered by the Hamas attack that killed over 1,200 Israelis. Ceasefire negotiations continue in Qatar, but major gaps remain. Qatar's Prime Minister said Hamas is willing to release hostages if Israel agrees to end the war, a condition Israel has so far rejected. Let's listen in to Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman bin Jassim Al Thani, the Qatari Prime Minister.
About the seriousness of the parties, it's something, honestly, I cannot judge 100% whether they are 100% serious or not. What we have noticed on Thursday is a bit of progress compared to the other meetings. Yet we need to find an answer for the ultimate question: how to end this war. That's basically, I think, the key point of the entire negotiations.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump and European allies are urging Israel to open humanitarian corridors, but hopes for an immediate breakthrough remain uncertain. Well, joining us to discuss the ongoing conflict in Gaza is Benny Binyamin, an ex-Israeli IDF member and a businessman joining us from Israel. Benny, thank you ever so much for being here. We ended up that read there talking about calls from Donald Trump, among other European allies, to end this aid blockage. What is going to happen in the short term regarding that situation? Do you think that pressure from Donald Trump and other world leaders will see an easing of this aid blockage?
First of all, good evening to everybody. And I wish on Wednesday we have an Independence Day we wish ourselves the 77th Independence Day of Israel. Sad story is from tomorrow we will mourn for our soldiers that were killed with all the wars that we had, 25,000 soldiers. So it's very, very sad. Each person who dies, never mind from which side, it is really a miss to this world, to this nice world. But the problem is not only that. The problem is all the negotiations must be by the both sides. Everybody is telling, Hamas is asking to stop the war for 5 years, and they will release the hostages. But they are not talking about the prisoners that we are supposed to release from Hamas and Jihad Islami. So it's not so easy to decide to take the prisoners who killed so many Israelis on the way. That's why they're in the prison. And some of we don't have death sentence of death. So they are there for, let us say, for 4 life prisoner or 20 life prisoners, and they are staying there. And they want that we'll release them. That's a very, very, very hard decision for the country. So we have oppositions, we have coalition, and we have all this. It's a democratic country. What we can do, we have that kind of yes and no. I think, yes, in the end of the day, our government will take a correct decision and do what they're supposed to do. And as per my opinion, our people who are there as hostages, they must come back as soon as possible. So, the government is deciding whatever they are deciding, but the public is completely with the people who they want to bring all the hostages back. That's the first thing. Second thing about the aids. Yes, we tried to give them aids. We tried to give them caravans. I know all this was supposed to doing well when the hostages were released. But today they are not doing that. Even they told them, okay, release 12 from 24 life that we have. They said no. So I mean, I really am not in the negotiations. I don't know exactly what is what and what is happening. But the public is completely waiting for our people to come back.
Yes, absolutely. Benny. I want to look at the resumption of fighting that we have seen. Of course, there was mixed opinions in Israel as to whether there should be a second phase of the ceasefire, which could potentially lead to more hostage releases, because at this point, since the resumption of fighting, there hasn't been any hostages returned by Hamas to Israel. What's that public consensus now?
See, one thing I can tell you, negotiation with the countries is much easier than negotiation with terrorists or guerrillas. It's very, very hard to do with these guys. And the countries are helping. Qatar is helping us. Egypt is helping us. Of course, America is beside us. Really, I'm not in negotiation, but I'm so sure that the pressure of the public that they have on them today, I think 80-90% of the public is demanding to bring our hostages back. They don't have any problem with any kind of payment that we'll do to release the terrorists from the prisons. That's somewhere about 5,000 prisoners. They don't have any problem also for that. The public I'm talking about, the government is having. So I don't know what is what, but I think, as per my opinion, the solution must come very soon. And if it not come soon, it is not good for Israel and not good for any other, the Palestinians too.
Absolutely, Benny. To bring an end to this discussion, of course, the impasse in these negotiations has continued, and while we've been showing a detail of strikes on screen, there is, of course, over 50 hostages, dead and alive, still being held by Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu has been clear in what he wants. He wants all hostages returned. He wants Hamas to be dissolved and disarmed so that no further attack like October the 7th in 2023 can take place. How does that be seen and be achieved given the ongoing fighting and impasse in negotiations?
It can be only in one side, the public of the Palestinians people there they are in Gaza. Of course, our friendly country, Egypt and Qatar, so that they can guarantee us that there will be no Hamas anymore there. And this Hamas, the people who are there, they talk about somewhere about 4,000, 5,000, I don't know how much. They must not be there. Because if they will be there, they want 5 years of ceasefire. In these 5 years, they will prepare themselves once again, because they don't have a problem to take small children like 14 years, 15 years and force them to be in the army, or force them to give them a gun and to go for a jihad. So they don't have this problem. So we don't want that will happen once again. We want the Gaza people will stay as good as till the 7th of October. They were coming to work with us. We were giving them electricity. We were giving them water. Whatever friendship I'm talking about, we had. I don't have any problem to do that with them and rebuild Gaza, as our former person he told on the TV now. So really, I mean that some solution must come. But I'm so sure that our full public is also on the same thoughts, that Hamas not be there anymore.
Benny Binyamin, thank you ever so much for joining us. Of course, the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas is causing difficulty on both sides, with the hostages still being held and difficult conditions and humanitarian situations ongoing in Gaza. While those negotiations continue, we will, of course, bring you all of the updates on the ongoing conflict and any ceasefire negotiations. But that is all that we have time for. We'll continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news very soon.